You know, it felt like just a few years ago that the New Orleans Saints were in a really bad place, and they were pretty much just going to be riding out the string on Sean Payton's coaching tenure there and Drew Brees' remaining years of his NFL career in a Saints uniform. Their defense was terrible. They really didn't run the ball with any consistency or proficiency. On the offensive side, Drew Brees would throw a ton, they'd score a ton of points, and they lose a bunch of close games. And there was no reason to really believe that that would change. But the 2017 season happened, and you started to see where, as the Saints went through a bit of a rebuild and retool on the fly, that they were assembling a pretty good team. Excuse me. And have had some recent success in the draft. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, here come the Saints winning the NFC South and a Marcus Williams missed tackle away from advancing to the NFC Championship game. So it was like a surprising season for the Saints, a really good season for the Saints, and also an incredibly heartbreaking season for the Saints. Because they were as poised as anybody out of the NFC, if we're being honest, to have made it to the Super Bowl, and it didn't happen, and that's got to be heartbreaking. So now you come back to 2018, there are some expectations for the Saints, and knowing that it's still Drew Brees' show, but how much longer is it going to be a show? You don't have the young heir apparent behind him, so it's pretty much your window of opportunity is however long Drew Brees' career still is, and you have to think that window is shutting very, very quickly. So if you're the Saints, if you think you're close, and clearly they did based off of their strategy in this draft, then you got to be aggressive and you got to go for it now because that's all that matters. That said, though, when you look at the Saints, are they really just one player away? I mean, yeah, they were certainly in the mix, and they are legitimate, and on paper they look like they'll be legitimate again in 2018. But were they really truly one player away? And if you were, why would you trade up from pick 27 all the way up to pick 14, only into the middle of round 1, giving up a first-round pick in next year's draft, which is incredibly valuable even if it's in the 20s, to take a raw 260-pound edge rusher who primarily wins with power, and there's not necessarily a guarantee that that translates to the NFL. I don't know about you, but that seems like an inherently risky and flawed strategy. Like, is Marcus Davenport the guy that you think is going to put you over the hump? Is Marcus Davenport the guy that you really think is going to be that dude? I remember a couple of years ago, people were really hot on Sheldon Rankins from Louisville for some damn reason, and I wasn't, and how's his career really turned out? So the same team that spent, what was it, the 12th pick on Sheldon Rankins, who hasn't really done much if we're being honest, now they're going to sit there and trade up for Marcus Davenport, and we're going to assume this is a great pick, especially when you had guys like Tremaine Edmonds and Derwin James on the board? Whew-wee. That seems like a lot to ask. And again, you gave up a first-round pick next year to go get a raw 260-pound edge rusher who wins typically at the college level in a way that may not translate to the NFL. This screams of a Derek Harvey type of Jaguars trade-up going years back. This screams of being a potential mega bust. And seems like incredibly poor strategy. I don't know. To me, if you're one player away, I don't know that Marcus Davenport is that player personally. Now, I think when you talk about the Saints draft, you do have to factor in that their second rounder this year was given away last year to move up into the early portion of round 3 to take Alvin Kamara. Clearly, that was worth it. And honestly, as much praise and such that John Lynch is getting, he passed on the ability to take Alvin Kamara. That doesn't look very smart now, does it? So I do feel like you have to factor that into the grading because they used that second-round pick from this year's draft to get a third-rounder last year to get a guy that was Offensive Rookie of the Year and is going to lead that backfield in 2018. So that's pretty good. But I look at the rest of this draft class, and I'm just not impressed. I thought Tre'quan Smith was a reach. Leonard, I didn't even think was a draftable player. Natrell Jamerson, okay, he's okay. And the rest of the guys? To me, this was a really head-scratching draft for the Saints. I mean, when you look at it fundamentally, it'll be measured based off of Marcus Davenport and Alvin Kamara, because that's really who you use the first 2 picks in this class on. So you know Kamara's panned out. Is Davenport going to pan out? You have really, for all intents and purposes, tied yourself to one guy producing in 2018, assuming he's the one guy that makes the difference for you, and I just don't see it that way. I'd feel like an Edmonds or a Derwin James could have potentially been that dude. They were better prospects. They had more star power. That doesn't mean that Davenport can't develop. That doesn't mean that Davenport can't be a great complement at end opposite of Kamrin Jordan. But that is a really big ask. You know, now with the Saints, they've been able to evaluate the wide receiver position pretty well over the years. Maybe they know something about Tre'quan Smith that I don't, and that is very possible. And they've earned a little bit of the right to get some benefit of the doubt there. But again, like I said, when you look at this class in general, look at what they gave up, look at what they got, I was not impressed. I thought they were one of the losers of this year's draft. They could have done more. It felt like they needed to do more. Or at least, if anything else, they needed to go in a different direction. To me, you shouldn't be so focused on getting one guy when you might very well not be one guy away. And I don't think the Saints were one guy away. So I'll be absolutely stunned if this trade up doesn't end up biting the Saints in the ass in the future.